The air inside the White House press briefing room buzzed with anticipation. Journalists sat at their usual places, their laptops open, ready to type furiously as soon as Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, stepped up to the podium. It was an ordinary day, or at least it seemed to be. The reporters had their questions lined up, some pressing about policy changes, others looking for a soundbite that would make headlines. But today, there was someone unusual in the room. Nestled between two reporters in the second row, a small girl sat, her legs dangling off the chair. She was no more than 10 years old, with bright blue eyes full of curiosity. Her honey blonde hair was pulled into 2 braids, and she clutched a notebook close to her chest. She had been brought along by her mother, Jennifer Sullivan, a senior journalist for one of the top news networks. Jennifer had assured her daughter, Emily, that she would be quiet and just observe. But Emily had other plans. As soon as Karoline Leavitt walked onto the stage, dressed in a crisp white blouse and navy skirt, Emily's eyes locked onto something unexpected. A delicate gold cross necklace rested just above Karoline's collarbone, glinting under the bright press room lights. Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She had seen a necklace just like that before, on someone very dear to her. As the press conference unfolded, reporters fired their questions, and Karoline responded with her usual poise. She was confident, articulate, and unwavering, deflecting the tougher questions with diplomatic skill. Emily squirmed in her seat. She wasn't here for politics or policy. She was here for that necklace. She turned to her mother and tugged on her sleeve. "Mom, can I ask a question?" she whispered. Jennifer looked horrified. "Sweetheart, this isn't a school Q&A session. This is the White House. Only journalists ask questions here." "But it's really important," Emily pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. Jennifer sighed. She knew that once Emily set her mind on something, there was no changing it. Before she could respond, Karoline's voice rang out over the room. "All right, one last question before we wrap up." Emily shot her hand up before her mother could stop her. The room fell silent for a moment as Karoline's eyes landed on the tiny girl among the seasoned journalists. A small smile touched her lips. "Yes, young lady?" Karoline said warmly. "What's your question?" The entire room turned toward Emily. Cameras pivoted in her direction. Jennifer looked like she wanted to melt into the floor, but Emily didn't notice any of it. Her voice was clear, and her question was simple. "Miss Leavitt, that necklace you're wearing, why is it so special to you?" For the first time in the entire press briefing, Karoline was caught off guard. The composed expression on her face softened, and she instinctively touched the gold cross resting against her collarbone. A flicker of emotion crossed her eyes. Something unspoken, something deep. The room, usually filled with sharp questions and strategic answers, fell into an expectant hush. Karoline took a slow breath. This was not a question about policy. This was something personal, something painful, and something she had never spoken about in public before. For a long moment, Karoline Leavitt stood silent at the podium, her fingers brushing over the delicate gold cross that hung from her neck. The press room, usually filled with the relentless clatter of keyboards and murmuring voices, had grown still. No one had expected such a question, especially from a child. Emily's blue eyes stayed fixed on Karoline, full of quiet curiosity. She didn't care about politics, press briefings, or news cycles. She only cared about the story behind that necklace. Karoline swallowed hard. This wasn't the kind of question she had prepared for. But something about the little girl's innocence, her sheer sincerity, made it impossible to brush off. With a slow exhale, she finally spoke. "This necklace," she said, her voice softer than usual, "was given to me by someone very special, someone who changed my life." A murmur rippled through the room, but no one interrupted. The reporters leaned in slightly, sensing that something rare was about to unfold. Karoline's grip on the podium tightened. The past she had tucked away, hidden from the world, was suddenly demanding to be spoken. "I was about your age when I first saw a necklace just like this one," she said, meeting Emily's gaze. "It belonged to my grandmother." A faint smile touched her lips, but her eyes glistened with something deeper, something raw. She was the strongest woman I've ever known. She raised me and taught me everything about faith, resilience, and kindness. And she never took this cross off. Emily's breath hitched slightly. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Karoline continued, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. My grandmother used to tell me that this cross wasn't just jewelry. It was a reminder. She paused for a moment, choosing her next words carefully. A reminder that no matter how hard life gets, no matter how dark things seem, there is always hope, that faith will guide us, even when we feel lost. A lump formed in Emily's throat. That sounded just like what her own grandmother had told her. But Karoline's voice faltered slightly, and she pressed her lips together before continuing. She passed away when I was just 12. A soft gasp came from Emily. Karoline gave a small, sad smile. It was the hardest thing I had ever been through. Losing her felt like losing a part of myself. But before she passed, she gave me this cross. She touched it gently. She told me to wear it always, to carry her faith with me wherever I go. Emily felt something wet slide down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, but her chest ached. Karoline's voice, though steady, had an unmistakable tremor. There have been times in my life when I felt like giving up, times when I doubted myself. But every time I looked at this necklace, I remembered her words, and they gave me strength. The silence in the room was deafening. Reporters who were normally focused on headlines and political drama sat frozen, captivated by something far deeper than the usual press briefing. Emily's small hands gripped the edges of her chair. She blinked up at Karoline, her vision blurry with unshed tears. My grandmother had a necklace just like that, she whispered, her voice barely audible. She used to tell me the same thing. For the first time, Karoline truly saw the little girl. Not just as a curious child, but as someone who had also felt loss. Their eyes met, and in that instant, they understood each other in a way no one else in the room could. Jennifer Sullivan, Emily's mother, watched in stunned silence. She had brought her daughter here expecting her to observe a routine press conference, not to witness a moment this profound. Emily's tiny fingers curled into a fist. She passed away last year, she admitted, her voice trembling. She gave me her necklace, but I was afraid to wear it. I thought if I lost it, it would mean I lost her too. Karoline's heart clenched. She took a step closer, leaning slightly toward Emily. Sweetheart, she said gently, you haven't lost her. She's still with you. In your heart, in your memories, and in that necklace. Emily let out a shaky breath. She glanced down at her lap, her lips trembling. Karoline hesitated, then made a decision. Slowly, she reached up and unclasped the gold cross from around her neck. The entire room held its breath. She stepped down from the podium and walked toward Emily. Kneeling slightly, she held the necklace out in her open palm. I want you to hold this for a moment, she said softly. Emily's small hands trembled as she reached out, touching the cross hesitantly. It was warm from where it had rested against Karoline's skin. As soon as her fingers closed around it, fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Karoline smiled gently. Your grandmother's love didn't leave you, Emily, and neither did her faith. Emily let out a tiny sob, clutching the necklace close to her chest. The entire room was silent. Even the most hardened reporters, people who had seen and reported on war, political scandal, and history in the making, sat frozen, many of them blinking rapidly. Jennifer put a hand over her mouth, trying to suppress the emotions welling up inside her. She had never seen her daughter open up about her grief like this. Not even at home. Karoline reached out and wiped a stray tear from Emily's cheek. Do you still have your grandmother's necklace? Emily sniffled and nodded. It's in my room. In a little box. Karoline smiled. Maybe it's time you wear it. Emily looked down at the golden cross in her hands. And for the first time since her grandmother's passing, she thought that maybe she could. Emily's small fingers trembled as she held the cross. She felt its weight. Not just the physical weight, but something deeper. The weight of memories, of love, of loss. Karoline watched her carefully, sensing the storm of emotions in the little girl's heart. She had felt it too once. The ache of missing someone so deeply that it felt like a piece of you had gone with them. A quiet sniffle broke the silence. Emily clutched the necklace tighter, blinking up at Karoline. "Did it ever stop hurting?" she asked in a small, broken voice. The question made Karoline's chest tighten. She exhaled softly, kneeling to Emily's level. "No," she admitted. "Not completely. You'll always miss her. Some days will be harder than others." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But one day, you'll think of her and smile instead of cry." Emily wiped her tear-streaked face with the back of her sleeve. "How do you know?" Karoline smiled gently. "Because that's what happened to me." The room remained eerily still. Not a single journalist interrupted. Not a single camera clicked. Everyone was frozen in the moment, watching an interaction that transcended politics or press briefings. Emily sniffled again. "I don't want to forget her." Karoline's smile didn't waver. "You won't." She glanced at the cross still clenched in the little girl's hands. "That necklace, it's not just a reminder of her. It's a reminder that love doesn't end, even when someone is gone." Emily's lip quivered. She had been carrying so much grief, afraid that moving forward meant letting go. But as she looked at the cross, at the woman kneeling in front of her, she realized something. Maybe holding on didn't mean never letting go of the sadness. Maybe it meant carrying love forward instead. Karoline reached out and gently closed Emily's fingers around the necklace. "You don't have to be afraid to wear yours," she whispered. "She would want you to." Emily stared at the cross in her hands for a long time before finally nodding. "Okay," she whispered. A small, watery smile crossed her lips. For the first time since her grandmother passed, Emily felt a little lighter. Karoline gave her hand a gentle squeeze, then stood up, glancing around the press room. The entire place was still caught in the quiet aftermath of the moment. Even the reporters, so used to the relentless grind of news, seemed to recognize that something rare had just happened. Clearing her throat, Karoline clasped her hands together. "I think that's a good place to end today's briefing," she said softly. There were no protests, no further questions. Just a quiet, profound stillness. As Karoline turned to step away, Emily's small voice called out again. "Miss Leavitt." Karoline turned back. Emily hesitated for only a second before stepping forward and, without warning, wrapping her tiny arms around Karoline's waist. As Karoline watched Emily step back, she felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just another day at the White House podium. It wasn't just another press briefing. This moment, this small, heartfelt exchange, was something she would carry with her forever. The reporters, usually aggressive and eager to push their own questions, seemed unusually subdued. A few exchanged glances, as if uncertain whether they should jump back into their usual political discourse after what had just transpired. But Karoline wasn't ready to leave just yet. She glanced at Emily's mother, Jennifer, who stood frozen in place, her lips slightly parted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Their gazes met, and Jennifer gave a tiny, grateful nod. Clearing her throat softly, Karoline turned back to the podium. "I think today," she said, her voice steady but warm, "we were reminded of something important." She placed a hand over her heart, letting the weight of the moment settle. There are times in our lives when we focus so much on what divides us. Politics, opinions, disagreements. But at the end of the day, we all experience love. We all experience loss. And we all need reminders that we are not alone. A hush spread over the room. Even the most skeptical journalists seemed drawn in, listening intently. "This necklace," Karoline continued, briefly touching the golden cross at her throat, "has always been my reminder. My grandmother's love never left me. And Emily's grandmother's love never left her, either." Emily's small fingers curled tighter around the cross she still held. She looked up at her mother, then back at Karoline, something new in her expression, something braver. Karoline smiled at her before turning back to the press. I know you all came here today expecting to hear about politics, she said, a hint of amusement in her tone. But sometimes, life gives us a different kind of story. A story that reminds us what really matters. A few chuckles spread through the room, light but sincere. Even the hardest political reporters seemed momentarily softened. Karoline exhaled, nodding once. Thank you all. That'll be all for today. With that, she stepped down from the podium. The room remained silent for a moment before reporters began murmuring to each other. Some started gathering their equipment. Others whispered about how this would play out in the news cycle. But Karoline didn't care about any of that. She walked straight to Emily and her mother. Jennifer, still struggling to find her voice, finally managed, I don't know how to thank you. Karoline shook her head. You don't have to. Her gaze softened as she turned to Emily. But I do have a request. Emily blinked up at her, surprised. What is it? Karoline knelt slightly so she was at eye level. The next time you put on your grandmother's necklace, I want you to remember this moment. Not just the sadness, but the love. Emily swallowed hard but nodded. I will. Karoline smiled and reached out, gently tucking a stray piece of Emily's hair behind her ear. Good girl. Jennifer let out a soft, emotional laugh. I never thought coming here today would turn into something like this. Karoline chuckled lightly. Neither did I. A voice suddenly called out from the press pool. Miss Leavitt. Karoline turned. A journalist, one of the more respected ones from a major network, stood with his notepad in hand. This was unexpected, he admitted. But I think a lot of people watching would love to know. What would your grandmother say if she saw this moment today? Karoline's smile softened. She glanced at Emily, then back at the reporter. She'd say that love is the greatest thing we leave behind. A hush fell over the room once more. Jennifer took her daughter's hand, squeezing it gently. Come on, sweetheart, she murmured. Let's go home. Emily looked up at Karoline one last time. Thank you. Karoline gave a small, reassuring nod. Anytime. And as the little girl and her mother disappeared through the doors, Karoline couldn't help but glance up slightly, as if somewhere, beyond the ceiling of the press room, beyond the sky itself, her grandmother was watching, and smiling. The press briefing was over, but the moment lingered. As Karoline stepped away from the podium and walked through the halls of the White House, she could still feel the weight of Emily's hug, the warmth of her tiny hands wrapped around her waist. She had handled thousands of questions before. Tough, controversial, sometimes downright hostile. But this was something entirely different. As she reached her office, Karoline's assistant, Michael, was already waiting. He looked up from his phone, eyes wide with disbelief. You need to see this, he said, turning the screen toward her. Karoline took a deep breath and glanced at the display. A news headline flashed across the screen. Heartwarming moment at White House press briefing. Karoline Leavitt's emotional exchange with a young girl goes viral. She blinked. That was fast. Michael let out a breathless laugh. Are you kidding? The video has already hit 1 million views. He scrolled down, showing her comment after comment flooding in. I don't care what side of the political aisle you're on. This was beautiful. A rare, genuine moment in Washington. Thank you, Karoline. That little girl's face broke me. This is why empathy matters. Faith, love, and family. Something we all need to remember. Karoline sat down, rubbing her temples. She had anticipated some reaction, but this was turning into something much bigger than she had expected. Michael leaned forward, lowering his voice. And it's not just the public. The president saw the clip. Karoline's head snapped up. Wait, President Trump? Michael nodded. He wants to see you in the Oval Office. Now. Karoline felt her pulse quicken. She had been working under President Trump for a while now, handling tough press conferences, defending policies, and keeping the media in check. But this was different. With a steadying breath, she rose to her feet and made her way toward the Oval Office. The president's approval. As she stepped inside, she found President Trump seated behind his massive, resolute desk, the golden curtains behind him glowing under the sunlight filtering through the windows. He looked up from his tablet, where the paused video of the press briefing was still playing. "You're trending, Karoline." She smiled tightly. "So I've heard." Trump gestured toward the seat in front of him. "Sit." She obeyed, folding her hands in her lap as he leaned back in his chair, studying her. "That," he said, tapping a finger against the desk, "was one of the best things I've seen come out of a press briefing in a long time." Karoline felt a mix of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. President." Trump shook his head. "No, I mean it. This is real America. A kid, her faith, her loss, and someone showing her kindness. This is what people connect with." He exhaled sharply, glancing at the paused video again. "We deal with politics all day long. People fighting, attacking each other, media twisting things. But this reminds people that we're human." Karoline nodded. "That's why I didn't treat it like just another question." "It wasn't." Trump smirked. "And that's why you're good at this job." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "Listen, I don't know what's going to happen with this story, but I have a feeling it's going to keep growing. Be ready for that." She straightened. "Understood, sir." He nodded. "Good. Now, go do what you do best. Handle the press." Karoline stood, offering a firm nod before exiting the Oval Office. As she walked through the halls once more, she realized something. This moment with Emily, it wasn't just a fleeting viral story. It was something that had struck a deeper chord with people. Something bigger than just her. And she had no idea just how far the ripples would go. By the time Karoline returned to her office, her phone was buzzing nonstop. Texts, emails, notifications. Everyone had something to say about the moment that had unfolded during the press briefing. Michael, her assistant, was already scrolling through a fresh wave of media coverage. "It's everywhere," he muttered, half in disbelief. "Fox News, CNN, even some of the late-night shows are talking about it." Karoline sank into her chair, exhaling deeply. "I figured it would make headlines, but this..." She trailed off, shaking her head. Michael turned his screen toward her. "And it's not just media outlets. Look at this." He pulled up Twitter, now X, where the hashtag #CrossOfLove was trending nationwide. No matter your politics, this was a powerful moment. Karoline Leavitt showing heart and faith in the White House? Refreshing. Little Emily's story reminds us all what really matters. Faith, love, family. #CrossOfLove. This is the America I want to believe in. A nation of kindness, not just politics. Karoline rubbed her temple. People really needed this, didn't they? Michael nodded. Yeah, and it's not just online. We're getting calls. News outlets want to interview you. Faith-based organizations are reaching out. Even a few nonprofits asking how they can support grieving children. Karoline hesitated. She wasn't used to being the center of a story like this, at least not in this way. She had spent her career handling the tough questions, pushing back against media narratives. But this was different. She was about to respond when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Normally, she wouldn't answer, but something told her to pick up. Karoline Leavitt speaking. A warm, slightly unsteady voice came through the line. "Miss Leavitt, I don't know if you remember me, but my name is Jennifer Sullivan. I'm Emily's mother." Karoline sat up straighter. "Of course, Jennifer. How is Emily?" Jennifer exhaled, and Karoline could hear the emotion in her voice. "That's why I'm calling. I need you to know what today meant to her." Karoline felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm listening." Jennifer took a shaky breath. "Since my mother passed, Emily has been so withdrawn. She wouldn't talk about it. She wouldn't wear the necklace my mom gave her. It was like she was afraid that if she did, it would make the pain worse." Karoline closed her eyes, already picturing the weight Emily had been carrying. "But after today," Jennifer's voice thickened. "When we got home, the first thing she did was take out my mom's necklace and put it on. She looked in the mirror and just smiled. For the first time in months, she smiled." Karoline swallowed hard. Jennifer cut in softly. You helped her heal, Miss Leavitt. Even if it was just a little bit, you gave her something I couldn't. And I'll never be able to thank you enough for that." Karoline pressed her fingers to her lips, absorbing the weight of those words. Finally, she whispered, "It wasn't me, Jennifer. It was your mother's love." Emily just needed to be reminded that it never left her. Jennifer let out a teary laugh. "Well, maybe you were the one meant to remind her." Karoline smiled, even as she blinked back emotion. "I'm just grateful I could be there." Jennifer hesitated. "Emily wants to send you something. Can I get an address where we can reach you?" Karoline hesitated, but then quickly gave her White House correspondence details. "Tell her I'd love to hear from her. She'll be so happy," Jennifer said warmly. "Thank you again, Miss Leavitt. Truly." As the call ended, Karoline sat back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. For all the battles she had fought in the press room, for all the controversies and policy discussions she had navigated, this moment meant more than anything else. And she had a feeling it wasn't over yet. The next few days were a whirlwind. The press continued to buzz about the emotional moment between Karoline and Emily, and the hashtag Cross of Love was still trending. Faith groups, community leaders, and everyday Americans were sharing their own stories of loss, healing, and the power of small but meaningful acts of kindness. Despite the overwhelming response, Karoline continued her work as usual, fielding tough questions, preparing for briefings, and staying focused on her role as White House press secretary. But then, something unexpected happened. One morning, as Karoline entered her office, Michael was waiting for her with a large envelope in his hands. He had a knowing smile on his face. "This came for you," he said, handing it over. Karoline took the envelope and noticed the return address. Emily Sullivan. Her heart skipped a beat. She carefully opened it, revealing a handwritten letter in neat, childlike handwriting. Along with it was a small drawing of a golden cross, colored in with crayons, surrounded by bright yellow rays like sunlight. She began reading. "Dear Miss Leavitt. Hi, it's me, Emily. I just wanted to say thank you again for talking to me the other day. It meant so much to me. My mommy told me you are very busy and important, so I hope it's okay that I'm writing you a letter. After I saw you wear your cross necklace, I knew I could wear mine again too. It makes me feel like my grandma is hugging me, just like you said. And you were right. She's still with me. I told my friends at school about you, and now they all want to wear necklaces that remind them of someone they love. Some of them didn't have necklaces, so I made little paper ones for them. My teacher says I'm starting a kindness club. I think that's funny. I hope you like my drawing. I made it special for you because now I think of you as my friend. Love, Emily." Karoline stared at the letter, blinking back tears. She traced her fingers over the drawing of the cross, feeling an overwhelming wave of warmth in her chest. Michael, who had been quietly watching, finally spoke. "That little girl is something special." Karoline let out a soft laugh. "Yeah, she really is." Michael grinned. "So, what do you want to do?" Karoline glanced back at the letter, then at the drawing. The answer was obvious. "I want to write her back." A few days after Karoline mailed her letter to Emily, she received an unexpected call. This time, it wasn't from a reporter, a political figure, or even Emily's mother. It was from the First Lady's office. "Miss Leavitt," the voice on the other end said warmly, "the First Lady has heard about your touching interaction with young Emily Sullivan. She was deeply moved by the story and would like to invite Emily and her mother to the White House for a special visit. Of course, we'd love for you to be a part of it as well." Karoline was momentarily stunned. "You mean, the First Lady wants to meet Emily?" "Yes," the woman confirmed. "She believes moments like these are what truly bring people together. She wants to host Emily and her mother for a personal tour of the White House and have a small tea in the Rose Garden. And if it's all right with you, she'd love for you to give Emily a special memento." Karoline's mind raced. A visit to the White House? A meeting with the First Lady? This would mean so much to Emily. "That sounds incredible," Karoline finally said. "I'd be honored to be part of it." The plans were set in motion, and within hours the news leaked. Little girl who inspired America invited to the White House. Hashtag Cross of Love story continues as Emily Sullivan receives a special invite. The media buzzed with excitement, and when Jennifer Sullivan, Emily's mother, was asked about it, her response was heartfelt. "I'm so grateful for everything Miss Leavitt has done," Jennifer told reporters. "Emily hasn't stopped talking about her since that press conference. And now, to have the chance to visit the White House and meet the First Lady, it's beyond anything we could have imagined." Emily, of course, was ecstatic. When a reporter asked her what she was most excited about, she simply said, "I just want to see Miss Leavitt again and show her my necklace." The date was set, and soon, Emily and her mother would be walking through the doors of the White House. Karoline, watching everything unfold, couldn't help but smile. She had no idea that a simple conversation about a gold cross necklace would turn into something this meaningful. And she had a feeling the best moment was still to come. The day had finally arrived. Emily Sullivan, dressed in a light blue dress with a tiny gold cross necklace around her neck, walked hand in hand with her mother as they entered the White House gates. Her eyes were wide with wonder, taking in every detail of the grand surroundings. Karoline stood near the entrance, waiting for them. When Emily spotted her, she gasped and let go of her mother's hand, running straight into Karoline's arms. "You came," Emily beamed. Karoline laughed, hugging her tightly. "Of course I did. I wouldn't miss this for the world." Jennifer, holding back tears, smiled warmly. "Thank you again, Miss Leavitt, for everything." Before Karoline could respond, a soft voice spoke from behind her. "Emily, it's so wonderful to meet you." Emily turned and gasped. Standing there was the First Lady of the United States, dressed elegantly, her hands clasped in front of her with a warm smile. Emily blinked up at her in awe. You know my name?" The First Lady chuckled. "I do, and I've heard so much about you. You've inspired a lot of people, young lady." Emily glanced shyly at her mother before looking back at the First Lady. "I just asked about a necklace." The First Lady smiled gently. "And that one question brought a lot of people together. That's a special kind of gift." Emily beamed. They proceeded with a private tour of the White House, led by the First Lady herself. Emily asked a million questions about the history, the rooms, even the chandeliers. But when they reached the Rose Garden, something truly special happened. Karoline took a small box from her pocket and knelt down to Emily's level. "I have something for you," she said softly. Emily's eyes widened. "For me?" Karoline nodded and opened the box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a tiny cross charm. "This is from me to you," Karoline said, "to remind you that your grandma's love is always with you, just like God's love." Emily's lower lip trembled, and then, just like that, tears welled up in her eyes. But this time they weren't tears of sadness. "They're happy tears," she whispered. Karoline smiled, fastening the bracelet around Emily's wrist. "I'll wear it forever," Emily promised, holding up her hand proudly. As cameras captured the moment, the story of a little girl, a gold cross, and a simple act of kindness spread even further, touching the hearts of millions across America. Later that evening, as Karoline watched Emily and Jennifer walk away from the White House, she realized something profound. In a world so often divided by politics, policy, and differences, it was the simplest things, faith, love, and human connection, that had the power to bring people together. And it all started with one little girl's question.